What it do, baby?
Welcome back to the ATB podcast. We're your hosts, Kelvin
Gary?
and today we'll be doing our analysis of the Utah Jazz. So before we start, I would like to say our question of the day, which is, who are your sleepers for this year's playoffs, and what are your thoughts on the new playoff format? And so to start, we would like to talk about the advantages.
So one other thing I wanted to add before we go into the advantages is, or just a few things about the Jazz in particular. So everybody may not know, but of course, the Jazz is debatably second or third best player, especially on offense, second best player. Bojan Bogdanovic is out for the season. He will not be participating in Orlando. He had wrist surgery. So we're not basing this off of, or how well we'll think they'll do off of how they played in the regular season. Of course, we have to take into account that one of their best players is hurt. And then one other thing is just in general, I wanted to mention that after you go down from the 1 to 3 seeds in each conference, I really think from 4 to 7, especially in the Western Conference, it really gets close here. So I just think that this is kind of where the second tier of contenders go after the 1 through 3 seeds. I think 4 through 7 is kind of your next tier as far as contenders. So just wanted to say that real quick. And then of course, going into their advantages, one glaring positive that the Jazz have had all season long is that they're first in 3-point percentage at 38.3%. They have several players shooting over 37% from three this year, including Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Joe Ingles, and of course Bojan Bogdanovic before he got hurt. So the Jazz are extremely efficient from the 3-point line, and of course in today's NBA, that's extremely vital, especially when you have great big men who can get you rebounds and give you extra shots, which Rudy Gobert definitely does, being fourth in the league in rebounds per game this season. So he's able to get so many rebounds, so many offensive rebounds, second chance points for your team. And when you shoot that well, everybody's packing the paint. He's getting a rebound. He's kicking it out. There's an open shooter, and that's a three. So that's just, that's probably, in my opinion, their biggest advantage going into the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. And I would like to point out they are 12th in 3-point attempts. So I think to take advantage of their shooting, I think they should take quite a bit more threes, because they're just they have their roster just filled with very good shooters. So I feel like in the playoffs they should just continue to take more threes, and I think that's where they thrive the most, because their team is just like, even their bench, they're all very good at shooting. And their team is like, outside of their big men, everyone is basically an above average shooter. So to get into another strength of the Utah Jazz is that obviously they have one of the best big men in the game today, which is Rudy Gobert. And as everyone knows, he's been in the running for Defensive Player of the Year for the past 3 years. And though he might not get it this year, he's still probably top 3 in the rankings. So I mean, obviously, because you have Gobert, he's one of the best paint protectors in the game, and their whole defense kind of revolves around him. And from what I can tell, even though their team doesn't have necessarily the best perimeter defenders, they're able to, they have a good amount of team defense, and they're able just to funnel everyone into Rudy Gobert. And that works pretty well for them, because it's just so hard to finish over him.
For sure. With the Jazz, they have a lot of, I'd say that the Jazz, especially with their bench and then a few of their starters, they're not the most athletic team. Obviously, you have one of the most athletic players in Donovan Mitchell, but a good amount of their team is they're old veterans and they're shooters. So a lot of them aren't going to be able to guard some of the more explosive guys in the league. But then you can allow a blow by, because you have the Stifle Tower in the middle, getting shots blocked, and of course 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. And I think that one thing, I think Rudy Gobert has been a little bit disrespected over this 3-month hiatus from the NBA. Of course, he did shut the whole league down. He was the first person to get the virus, and it became a huge meme, and now he's lost a lot of respect because of that. But I don't think that he should lose any respect for what he does on the court, and I think he definitely has. He's definitely a top 5 center in the league, a top 5 rim finisher, and he's an elite paint protector. I was looking at some of his stats a little bit deeper. He's second in the league in 2-point percentage at 70%. He's fourth in blocks, third in total rebounds, and he's second in offensive rebounds, averaging 3 per game, or actually, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, 3.5 per game. So,
Mm-hmm.
as much as you want to, joke about what he did, or kind of some of the stupid mistakes that he's made, he's still an elite player, and he's playing at a very high level. First time making the All-Star team this year, and he does it on both ends of the floor. He may not have the most polished offensive game, but when you do as much on defense as he does, and when you finish as well as he does, it really kind of, you don't need to have that much of an offensive game if you can do everything else so well, which he does.
Yeah. And he's even though it doesn't really seem like it, Rudy Gobert's definitely improved his offensive game over the years. Though he still is basically non-existent from outside of 5 feet. But this year, from what I've seen, it seems like he's a little more comfortable driving the ball than he was in previous years. He's not just rolling to the basket now. Seems like sometimes he gets the ball in the high post, and he can pull off a spin move every once in a while, or just go hard to the rim. And he's because he has so much length, it makes it pretty easy for him to finish over some of the smaller bigs in today's game.
I think I may be wrong. I may be tripping, but I think I actually saw him make a mid-range jumper earlier this season. So definitely making improvements.
Yep.
Of course I saw the videos, before the season of him working on his 3-point shot, but I'm telling you, next year, y'all better everybody watch out for the Jazz, okay? Because it's gonna be him and Bogdanovich. They're gonna be the foreign Splash Brothers, okay? 33s per game
Rudy
from
Gobert's
Gobert.
about to become the next Brook Lopez.
Hey, I mean, just wait till June, all right? Or I guess it is June. So wait till July.
Instead of Splash Mountain, it's gonna be the Splash Tower.
Hey, I don't, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Just watch out for him. 0% from 3. I don't know. Kind of scary. But anyway, going into another advantage of theirs, we've been talking a lot about their defense, and of course with Rudy Gobert. But another thing that they're really good at is perimeter defense, especially with their wings. While Mike Conley has been a good defender for the majority of his career, I think everybody knows that this has been a down year for him. New system, you go from being a second or third option your whole life to now being kind of just in the mix, getting your shots. You don't really know how many you're going to have every night. And so defensively, he's kind of taken a step back as well with age and injury as well. But I think that they overcompensate for maybe his lack of defense this season with Royce O'Neal and Joe Ingles. And they're both two elite. Well, I'm not. Ingles is getting up there in age, but Royce O'Neal is definitely an elite wing defender. They signed him to an extension earlier this season. It was pretty early in the season, may have been around October or November. But the reason you signed him is for 3-and-D, and he's one of the best 3-and-D players in the league. Very underrated. And with Joe Ingles, not only does he give you great perimeter defense, but he also gives you great shooting and great playmaking. He's, in my opinion, the best playmaker on the team. And when he runs the pick and roll, he's going to find Gobert or the open shooter. So those two guys are really they're unsung heroes for the Jazz, and they're going to be big for the playoffs if they want to advance.
Definitely. Yeah. So another thing with Royce O'Neal is that he's almost like a slightly better PJ Tucker. He reminds me a lot of PJ Tucker, and and he's better in a way that first of all he's a lot younger, so he puts a little. He's just
more mobile.
He's a little more mobile around the perimeter, and he's just he's just built like a brick. He's just
very strong.
And he's able to basically guard anyone from probably the 2 to the 4, maybe even some point guards if they're not really fast. But so that just makes him very versatile. And this year he's been playing a lot of power forward, so it's given the Jazz a very good option at either forward spot, just in case they need to just to switch up the lineup a little bit. And this year he's also been a very good shooter, though he still can't really create his own shot yet. But just being able to be a good defender and a definitely a just below an elite shooter is very beneficial for the Jazz.
For sure. I think obviously someone that we haven't talked about a lot yet is of course Donovan Mitchell, and he's obviously probably their biggest advantage going into the playoffs. He is averaging 24 points per game on 45% from the field, 38% from three, and 86% from the free throw line. By far his most efficient season. He made his first All-Star game this year. He's 14th in the league in points per game, and obviously, if you want to make a deep playoff run, it all starts with your star, and he's definitely a bona fide number one option who can give you 25 to 30 a night as long as they're not double teaming. The only real problem with Donovan Mitchell is sometimes a lack of intelligence as far as shooting the ball, just shot selection.
Yeah,
I'd say is really his only problem, but he's gotten, like I said, he's gotten a lot better with that because he is shooting, 45% from the field. So if he can improve his playmaking a little bit more, and maybe just some games take a few more inside shots rather than threes, he could easily be, in my opinion, I think that he could be a future, 5 to 10 time All-Star.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely think like he can definitely be an All NBA player in the next few seasons. And just watching Donovan Mitchell this year, the main points that stand out to me is his shooting and his playmaking. And I know you were just talking about how he needed to improve his playmaking, and he still does. But this year, it just seems like he's a little more under control with his playmaking, and he's making smarter decisions. He's missing less windows, and that's really beneficial to the Jazz because first of all, their point guard has been injured for like half the year, and second of all, another thing I wanted to bring up is that I feel like Donovan Mitchell does his best work with the ball in his hands. He's kind of like Dwayne Wade, how like they're basically point guards, but like they have this. It's hard to say, but like it just he I feel like he excels as the main ball handler on the team, which also showed last year when Ricky Rubio, I'm not sure, I think he got injured for a bit or he was just sitting out, and there was just like a whole month where Donovan Mitchell was the primary ball handler, and that was his best month as a pro, where he was averaging like almost like 30 points per game. And to me, I feel like the best player to surround Donovan Mitchell with is shooters, and which is what the Jazz have right now, and especially at the point guard position. I feel like as long as Mike Conley can, because Mike Conley was in a shooting slump for basically the first half of the season, but near the end of the season he really picked up his play, and in the last month of the season, though it's a very small sample size at only 5 games, Mike Conley was averaging 16 points on 47.5% from the field and 45.5% from three. So just basing off of that and the fact that he put up basically the same numbers in February, just a little bit less efficient, it makes me really hopeful that because coming into the season, I think a lot of people had the Jazz as like their dark horse contenders, because they had a lot of hope for the Conley Mitchell pairing. But at the beginning of the season, that hope kind of died away when Mike Conley was just struggling, and he was basically just like very bad.
For sure,
that's the only way to put it. But as the season went on, it really seemed like he's ramped up his play a bit, and though I doubt he will ever be able to play like where he was last season in Memphis, just because he's not getting the ball as much, but still averaging 16 points and being like above 40% shooter and playing above average defense is all you really need to pair next to Donovan Mitchell.
For sure. I actually agree. I think that Donovan Mitchell, I think he should be played as a point guard because I think he thrives best when he does, because he needs the ball, like you said. He's not a catch and shoot kind of guy. He's a take action kind of player. And he's very similar to Dwayne Wade, like you were saying. Great in the pick and roll. He has a really good floater game. He's extremely explosive, and he's an extremely just explosive defender as well. He's not near where Dwayne Wade was at his peak, of course, defensively, but he definitely has all the tools because his athleticism is through the roof, and so is his work ethic.
Also, he's shooting like somewhere like in the high 40% from mid range this year, which is crazy considering he's taking
got a great
like the third most attempts in the league.
Yeah, I remember when he was. Was it Kobe or Dwayne Wade? I think he had a workout. It may have been with both of them, to be honest. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just remember seeing videos of him. He's always working on his mid-range shot. He's one of those guys that he knows in my it's still a valuable shot in
Hmm.
today's NBA if you can hit it because they're
Yep.
going to leave it open.
Especially in the
So
playoffs.
for sure, yeah, they're going to sag off. So he's going to have that shot when he wants it
Hmm.
because of his athleticism and ability to get to the rim. I think
If you don't,
few
I wanted to talk a little more about Donovan Mitchell. If that's fine.
yeah. So
Yeah.
one more
So
thing I want to add. Oh yeah, you go first. You good?
okay. Yeah. So for Donovan Mitchell, I was talking when I was talking about improvements. I also said his shooting, and what I noticed is that he has a much better. His shot is a lot more fluid this season than last season, at least from a 3-point range. And he's shooting a lot of them, and I know he's not like shooting close. He's shooting like in the high 36%, like 36.7 or something like that.
Mm.
But his shot, like you can definitely tell he's a better shooter than he was last year. And another thing is that last year his shot was getting blocked a lot. Like I think he was up there in one of the most like block shots per game, like getting blocked. Not
Yeah.
I'm blocking shots, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but this season he's cut that down to like half of what it was last season. And he's always been very explosive, but now that he's been able to finish a lot better than he did last season, it really opens up his game. And again, as I was saying, he's a better shooter than he was last season, and plus with a much better mid-range game than last season, it really opens up. Well, he's basically the definition of like a all-around scorer. He
Yeah.
can score anywhere on the court, and though he doesn't really make the most efficient shots for himself, but he's like his shot selection is kind of awkward in a way. He forces up. He doesn't force them up. He takes a lot of these tough mid range and floaters, but that's what he does, and he's very good at making them. Especially this season with how good his efficiency has been. So that bodes really well for the Jazz coming into the playoffs, especially because they have very few shot creators now that Bojan Bogdanovic isn't gonna play.
For sure. I think everything that you said is true about Donovan Mitchell. Like we've been saying, I think he's got all NBA potential. If he's not already an all NBA player, you can make the debate that he could be uh, this season with how he's been playing and leading this team. Because as much as we had high anticipation or high expectations for the Jazz this season, and he just continues to lead this team as young as he is to where everybody expects them to be. I think third
Mm-hmm.
straight season making the playoff, or is it fourth? I think it's third
It's
straight
third,
season.
third, yeah.
Making the playoffs. All three of his first three seasons, playoff success, never been swept. He just
Mm-hmm.
continues to lead this team at an extremely young age, and he continues to get better every year. So it's only a matter of time before he makes an All NBA team.
Yep.
A few more, of the last advantages, in my opinion, for the Jazz, or glaring positives for them, in my opinion, are defensive potential for them. I think a lot of people thought that they'd be top five in defense this year, and they've been 11th in defensive rating and 9th in points per game allowed. They're allowing around 108 points per game. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think that that's below what everybody thought that they would be with all their great perimeter defense and of course Rudy Gobert. But to still be in the top, half in each of those categories in the top 10 in points per game allowed, um, you still have
And
time
right
in the
outside the
playoffs.
top 10 in
Mhm.
defensive rating.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so you have, now you have the playoffs as well. So that potential hasn't even been, in my opinion, unlocked yet defensively,
Mm-hmm.
because now you've had this
Especially
rest.
since like everyone's been injured, especially like
Exactly.
Mike
Yeah.
Conley, and
Mhm.
they just haven't had a lot of playing time with like their whole team healthy.
Yeah. They brought so many, two of their starters are new, and then their sixth man is new. So that's three of like your main 6, 7 dudes are all new to the team. So they haven't had a lot of time to play, especially defensively. So it's either going to be the playoffs of this year or next season. I guarantee they'll be top five in defense or in defensive categories because their potential is so great. And then one more thing I wanted to add, or one more person I wanted to talk about, was Jordan Clarkson, because
Mm-hmm.
since coming to the Jazz, he's been extremely efficient, and I think he makes a case for maybe even being sixth man of the year on the Jazz. He's averaging 15.5 points per game on 48% shooting, 37% from three, 78% from the free throw line. It's extremely efficient. He's giving you 16 a game. They desperately needed scoring off the bench because the rest of their bench just isn't great. So
Yeah.
I definitely think with Bogdanovich out, he can definitely give you 20 a game and be that second guy.
Yeah, definitely. And that was a great pickup by the Jazz at the trade deadline, and he definitely brings like some much needed shot creation from the bench, or just overall, because outside of Donovan Mitchell and occasionally Mike Conley, the Jazz really have no shot creators. That's really about it. Unlike a team like the Celtics, where they have an abundance of shot creators, it's like for the Jazz, it's basically like it's always gonna go back to either Donovan Mitchell or like Mike Conley, or else it's either that or a 3-point shot or like a pick and roll. But even then, they don't have that many playmakers either. As we were saying, their best playmakers arguably Joe Ingles, and well, he's obviously a good playmaker, but they just don't have any guy that's like Ricky Rubio, that type of playmaker. I mean, they traded him away, so. Oh yeah, and then talking about Ricky Rubio, I would like to say, even though Mike Conley hasn't played that well this season, I think with how he was playing at the end of the season, I think he's still a good, I wouldn't say an upgrade just yet, but I think if he keeps on keeping up the way he was playing at the end of the season, I think he's definitely an upgrade for Ricky Rubio, at least for the Jazz, because in my opinion, he just fits a little bit better.
Yeah, especially with the need for points come playoff time. He definitely helps you more than Ricky Rubio would.
Yep. All right, so I think next we're gonna move on to some of their negatives or disadvantages. So to start off, they have a really weak bench, and as we were saying, they, at least before they got Jordan Clarkson, they basically had no shot creators off the bench, and I think their sixth man was probably like Georges Niang or like Jeff Green, and those guys they're okay and all, but they're nothing special, and they're definitely not a good sixth man for a team that's trying to contend. And the thing with the Jazz's bench is that they only really have a couple of playable guys. Like they have Royce O'Neal, or when he was coming off the bench, but sorry, I meant like Georges Niang, Tony Bradley, Emmanuel Mudiay, and like that's about it. And Jordan Clarkson, now that they signed him. But outside of those four, there's really no one else that you can play. And not only that, it's just like Emmanuel Mudiay, Georges Niang, and Tony Bradley. Like they're not really, they're just average role players at best, in my opinion. And they're pretty inconsistent too, especially like Emmanuel Mudiay and Tony Bradley, who I don't even think should be like are good enough to be on a playoff team, just personally at this point. But that being said, they don't play their bench a lot either. They really rely heavily on their starters.
For sure, I really agree. I think that their depth is a real problem, and I definitely think that it's gonna come back to haunt them come playoff time. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with those guys. Georges Niang's a really good shooter. Emmanuel Mudiay's got, definitely potential to be a really good backup in this league. And then Tony Bradley's a serviceable backup. But with most teams, you want to have at least 2 or 3 guys that you're like, okay, I got my 6th man here who's going to give me 15 to 20. I have my rim protecting, lob finishing backup center, maybe even who could shoot, like a Maxi Kleber or a Mo Bamba, somebody like that. And then, you want to have like a sharp shooting guard or wing, just like one more guy who's sharp shooting. And that was Joe Ingles or Royce O'Neal when they weren't starting him. But now you don't have Bogdanovich. So now what I assume is that they're going to start Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Joe Ingles, and Rudy Gobert. So now one of those guys is coming up to the starting lineup. And now you have Jordan Clarkson and the guys that we just named off who, like we said, are okay. But to me, you really only have 7 guys who should really actually be playing. I think that
Yeah.
Georges Niang is valuable to the team with his shooting, but I think with Emmanuel Mudiay's inconsistency and
Oh, and I would like to say I didn't. Okay, I didn't really mean that Emmanuel Mudiay, because I actually think he's been a pretty good backup this season,
mm,
and he's really kind of revived his career in a way.
mm.
So because I think he can definitely be a decent backup on a contending team, and he's been playing pretty good for the Jazz this season. He just needs to be a little more consistent.
For sure. Like I said, he's got really good potential. He's still under
He's 23.
25 years old.
Yeah.
So, 7 points per game, 36% from three. He definitely is a serviceable backup. I just think that overall their depth could definitely be better because they don't, after Clarkson, they don't really have like that seventh man who you're like, okay, I can really trust him to go give me 10 and really good defense or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So another disadvantage for the Jazz are just a few actual statistics where they rank, and this is just when I was reading this, I was a little bit concerned. They're 29th in blocks per game, 30th in steals per game, and 27th in fast break points per game. Mm-hmm. So as much as we talk about their rim protection and things like that, the rest of the team's not helping, and that really shows the lack of backup bigs. Because if Gobert's averaging 2 blocks per game, I was looking at it, nobody else averages over a half block per game. So that means that your backup bigs aren't really giving you anything on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And your backup guards aren't giving you a lot either, because you're 27th in fast break points and you're 30th in steals. You're dead last in steals. You're 27th in fast break points, which means that you play at a slow pace. And as we know, today's NBA is extremely fast. But with the way that the Jazz plays, it's a lot of Donovan Mitchell ISOs and pick and rolls, or it's a Joe Ingles pick and roll, to find a playmaker.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a Mike Conley pick and roll. But that's really it. They're the only three guys who ever really have the ball. Of course, with Big Donovic, Bogdanovich being gone. You can't give it to Gobert in the post. Royce O'Neal is not a shot creator. And then, of course, you have Jordan Clarkson off the bench. But there's a lack of shot creating and there's a lack of pace for the Jazz. And when it comes playoff time, everybody's going to want to run. And so I think it's going to be a real problem for them keeping up with teams with easy buckets and fast break opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that will be a problem. But I actually think that will be less of a problem in the playoffs because teams are more focused on taking away the transition, like good transition offense, like offenses like, for example, when the when the Raptors shut down Giannis, who is one of the best transition players in the league. So I actually think it will be less of a problem in the playoffs. However, being dead last in transition points does not bode well for you at all. So another thing that I wanted to say is that obviously their bench isn't very good, and you already mentioned the big man rotation. But they have no shot creation in clutch time. That's what I was gonna say. When I know you already mentioned this, but I just wanted to bring up. I was watching the Jazz Clippers game when the Jazz won against the Clippers with Paul George and Kawhi. When I was watching them in clutch time, it was just possession after possession. It would swing around the perimeter. People the players would try to make something happen, but they couldn't. So what happens the ball always goes back to Donovan Mitchell. And he made a lot of clutch shots that game, and that's why they won the game. So that it worked out for them that game. But in the playoffs, if that's gonna happen every single playoff game, Donovan Mitchell, as great of a player as he is, he's not going to be able to get you a bucket every single time.
For sure. I don't think he's proven quite yet as a very clutch player in the league, just because he hasn't had a lot of those opportunities. And that's another thing, with Bogdanovich. I remember he had 2 game winners this season, one against Milwaukee and can't remember. I think the other one was against Houston. Yeah, he had that long bomb, 3 for the win. So losing him is really going to hurt them because a lot of those guys don't want to take the last shot, and Donovan Mitchell does. But I think that's where some of his shot selection can kind of go downhill, is when it's in the end of the game, because he knows, I've got to take this shot.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't know if you have any more disadvantages, but
no, I was just gonna conclude. I was just gonna say, to me, the Jazz are a team that they had very a lot of potential coming into the league, coming into the season, and I still think they have the potential to reach it. Just um, in February, or I mean in January, the Jazz were 11-4, 11 wins and 4 losses, and during that stretch, I believe they had an offensive rating of like 119 and like a defensive rating of like 110. And though their defense isn't as good as last season, but we've seen them in previous seasons, and we know how good they can be on the defensive end. It was always the offensive side where we worried for the Jazz, and this season, they're better offensively than they are defensively for the first time in the past half decade. So to me, as long as they can get their defense to where it was last season, and they can get they can get Mike Conley back, and I know they're gonna miss not having Bogdanovich, but if they can just get Mike Conley back, I still think I definitely don't think they're contenders this season, but maybe next season with everyone healthy and some chemistry built up, and maybe a few more additions to their bench, I definitely think they'll be contenders next season. Though I think their window's a little short with Mike Conley aging. Yeah.
For sure. I think, one more thing like we do like we try to do for every team. How far do you think the Jazz will go this season?
Well, to me, I think their ceiling is the second round, just because they lost Bogdanovich, and I don't have the highest hopes for their team chemistry and just how well their lineups are going to work out this season, especially with their lack of depth. But yeah, to me, I think I think their ceiling is the second round. But to me, I think it's more likely that they'll lose in the first round, just because I think Bogdanovich was a really big part of their offense.
I agree. I think that I really can't see them making it out of the first round. I just think when you lose a guy who is shooting almost 50, 40, 90 and giving you 20 a game, when you lose that, I mean, your second best offensive player, that's a huge blow, especially when you don't have people on the bench to pick up the slack. So I think that everybody would have to step up extreme, very well, Conley and Clarkson, and it would be a lot, and I just don't think that they'll be able to put it all together with everything that's been going on, and with their lack of depth. Just when you have, and they already have guys playing out of position. You have a guy like Joe Ingles or Royce O'Neal who should be playing the 2 or the 3, most likely the 3, but they're playing power forward, and to me, they're especially with Joe Ingles, he's a lean dude. He's a playmaker. You can't have that guy playing power forward. So with the guys playing out of position, the lack of depth, and not having your second best offensive player, I just don't think. I think offense is going to be a really big struggle, and I think some games are going to be just hard to watch in the playoffs because they're not going to have anybody else to go to besides Donovan Mitchell and a few other guys on offense.
Yeah, definitely. So that concludes our analysis of the Utah Jazz. If you enjoyed this video, go check out some of our other videos down in the channel below. And as always, we'd love to hear all of y'all's feedback, and we'll try to respond to as many comments as we can. So as always, we'll see you guys in the next one.
See ya.